Okay, so I actually just barely finished recording a video that was like an hour and a half long, where I was trying to explain what I have written down here, and um, I was inhibited by hypnosis, which is why it took much longer. So I'm gonna get this taken care of as quickly as possible. Um, anyways, so let's see. I did elaborate a little bit more on here, but the hypnosis really inhibited me from being able to finish in a timely manner. Anyway, speech inhibition is distinguishably caused by hypnosis because hypnosis makes speech feel strained compared to forgetfulness. It in the this in this context, it's because the um, act of speaking, even when I would be like experiencing occasional forgetfulness or coincidental forgetfulness, would not never feel strained if it was just by coincidence or any other variable, right? But with a hypnosis, it specifically made my the act of speaking feel very strained, um, very unusual. So it's very easy for me to be able to distinguish that myself. But other people, not as much. And the reason I'm doing this is because it's really important for people to understand that what the examples that I'm giving of when the hypnosis is inhibiting me from doing something is 100% definitely caused by the hypnosis and not by some other variable. Um, and the reason for that is when I need to be able to have my evidence have some form of credibility. And anyway, so I had to write all this down because the hypnosis inhibits my memory while I'm speaking, and it also makes me drag things out a lot longer. A post-hypnotic suggestion is an instruction given during hypnosis. So basically, in hypnosis, say for example, when you see the stage hypnosis demonstrations, and a person might forget their own name, or they start singing or dancing, laughing, or crying, or whatever behavior, right? Uh, the post-hypnotic suggestions are the instructions the hypnotist gives those subjects when they to act upon when they wake up from the hypnosis. So, for example, a person is in the trance and they're in hypnosis and they're told to forget their name, which is a post-hypnotic suggestion, or to start singing or dancing or laughing or crying, etc. And when they wake up, they act on those suggestions, those instructions given to them, those post-hypnotic suggestions of laughing, crying. Um, I should have written this down, for example, right? uh, Forgetting their name, or dancing, singing, and they act upon these after they wake up from the hypnotic trance that they were in. That's why it's called a post-hypnotic suggestion, because they respond to this suggestion after they wake up from the hypnotic trance. And all right, so this is what ended up happening to me, right? They told me that they were going to take me to the. This is what the people that hypnotized me ended up doing, and I had to explain what a post-hypnotic suggestion is so that you can understand what I'm saying. So, they told me that they were going to take me to the laundromat and hypnotize me to feel dizzy, confused, disoriented, dysphoria, nausea, drowsiness, to experience memory loss, and a variety of other unpleasant and inhibiting post-hypnotic suggestions. Whenever I was learning anything or doing anything that could help me reverse the effects of hypnosis or obtain and disclose evidence of me being abused with hypnosis, they hypnotized me to feel like my brain was spinning in a washing machine on the spin cycle, turning to mush. When these post-hypnotic suggestions were cued or triggered, and they told me that they were doing this to me. They told me that they were doing that to me because they were, quote, brainwashing me. So it's very specific that, this is something that was this is an example of a very specific metaphor. And, other coincidental variables, right? Like dementia, Alzheimer's disease, traumatic brain injury, some other medical conditions, sleep deprivation, medication side effects, or drug use. Are some examples that can cause cognitive inhibition, a lot of memory loss, a variety of different things, right? But these symptoms are never necessarily cued or triggered. Like a post-traumatic stress disorder can be triggered, for example, but not not like a traumatic brain injury or Alzheimer's or dementia or these other variables, right? Now, what else they don't do is this is differentiating between hypnosis and coincidence, right? Is the metaphor that they used, right? I've never heard of anybody having a symptom or a side effect, including something along the lines of metaphor, right? Especially like one pertaining to one pertaining to a behavior specifically, and relevantly, because that they did that very, very well, very understandably, and it's what's called an isomorphic metaphor. So your standard metaphor is basically a metaphor that could be applied to and when in regards to hypnosis, applied to anybody's situation, right? But this one, for example, is specifically applied to my specific situation of being inhibited with hypnosis. And that's what an isomorphic metaphor is classified as. So let's see, moving on. They gave me 3 conditions to not trigger or cue the post-hypnotic suggestions, which were if I were to notice I was being abused with hypnosis, which I'm going to explain a little bit how that kind of varies. If someone else would notice that I was hypnotized, or unless they would get caught for it. So at first, when I originally got hypnotized, I didn't know I was hypnotized for over a year after I was hypnotized. And then I didn't know that I was being abused with hypnosis for a little over another year after finding out that I was hypnotized in the first place. So, that condition of unless I would notice that I was being abused with hypnosis didn't exactly apply after I found out that I was being abused with hypnosis. And I also explain a little bit more in depth on that. So, let's see. Next section. So, I'm also intelligent, above average intelligence. I've graduated high school a year early and started college a year early, and obtained A's and B's in all my classes with little to no effort. And since reading quickly and completing college assignments quickly on a regular basis was necessary in order for me to pass my classes, and it was very noticeable and suspicious whenever I experienced cognitive inhibition, inability to read at a normal rate, inability to write at a normal speed, abnormal confusion, memory loss, amnesia, repression of memory, or inability to complete tasks in a reasonable amount of time. It became more suspicious and noticeable when these suggestions were suddenly cued or triggered to very specific events, because the onset of the hypnotic suggestions would suddenly initiate in response to the cue/trigger because these feelings and sensations do not begin and end abruptly in normal day-to-day life. So I'm going to go ahead and explain some of this real quick. What I ended up actually kind of finding out in the last video, which actually really makes a lot of sense, because that is the tendency and the pattern that they followed with this. So there, I actually remember them specifically mentioning this. So there was a boiling a frog metaphor, right? And what the metaphor consists of is like when boiling a frog, the animal, if you stick the frog directly into boiling hot water, the frog will feel the pain and immediately jump out of the boiling hot water. Now, you can actually avoid this by boiling the frog slowly. Or in other words, putting the frog in the water at room temperature and then slowly increasing the heat to a boil. And the frog won't notice the sudden increase in temperature. So that seemed to be like what their first line approach to controlling my behavior was. And if that wasn't enough to work, and if it was significant enough for them to, or essential enough for them to inhibit me from doing something, they would use extreme methods, even if it was noticeable, as a last resort. And one example of this was I was hypnotized to I was hypnotized to feel dizzy whenever I tried to fill out apartment applications, and they typically try to inhibit me from ever even like trying to start, right? Or using like more subtle approaches, less obvious approaches, with the hypnosis to prevent me from doing so. And then if the post-hypnotic suggestions that they programmed into me didn't work to stop me from filling out an apartment application, then I would suddenly feel dizzy trying to fill out an apartment application. I mean, extremely dizzy. To the point where it felt like the room was spinning uncontrollably. Very, very severe, extreme intensity, right? And this is the example of like, it was like, okay, so I noticed that they were increasing the for example, increasing the temperature didn't work because I didn't want to be in the water at all, right? So then they just tried to shove me in the boiling hot water, as an example. Extreme difference that was extremely noticeable. And they also used, an explanation to try to cover it up, because they created the illusion that I had to do something first. Get something done first before I was able to before they would let me fill out an apartment application. And I ended up becoming homeless because of that, because I was staying in motels at the time, and I spent all my disability back pay money on motels, so I couldn't pay rent, or so I couldn't get an apartment and pay a deposit and everything along those lines when I had the money for it, but it all went to motels because I couldn't focus to fill out I couldn't fill out an apartment application because I was too dizzy whenever I tried to. And this was also very distinguishable because when I was on my laptop and I wasn't trying to fill out an apartment application, doing anything else, say for example, listening to music on Facebook, or reading, studying, right? Specifically before I found out that I was being abused with hypnosis, but I knew that I was hypnotized. I didn't have the inhibition or intensity of the inhibition, at least with learning and studying, or things that would have been noticeably abusive, right? But as a last resort, they did that with the apartment applications, and then as soon as the only way for me to get the dizziness to stop would be to close my laptop, or else it just and it would actually stop, or to close the tab, start listening to music or something, do something else. And anyways, moving on. So I explained that, and let's see. One technique they used to control my behavior was by repression or minimizing feelings of anger and fear, and even the intensity of the post-hypnotic suggestions, so that I would tolerate the suggestions, or specifically to avoid me from recording myself, as another example, like I am right now, because the post-hypnotic suggestions became intolerable, to the point where I had to take extreme measures to record myself, because the inhibition was very intense and extreme, and I'm not putting up with it anymore. The post-hypnotic suggestions used to inhibit my ability to learn or obtain and disclose evidence of me being abused with hypnosis seem to have similar characteristics to hypnosis seals, which use post-hypnotic suggestions like uncontrollable crying or laughing, nausea, psychosomatic reactions like palpitations, intense itchiness, feeling of intense hot or cold, anxiety, or other post-hypnotic suggestions that can inhibit hypnotic induction, or at least make it more difficult to induce hypnosis, that are triggered and cued by the word hypnosis, or by the situation when someone is trying to hypnotize the subject. I've noticed from experience that the post-hypnotic suggestions to prevent me from being hypnotized were triggered and cued in the same context and circumstances as the hypnotic suggestions to inhibit learning and inhibiting my ability to organize and gather evidence, where the post-hypnotic suggestions were only triggered while I was specifically engaging in those behaviors, and were not triggered if someone else would notice or if they would get caught for it, so that the suggestions would go undetected by other people. Hypnosis has controlled my sleeping patterns in several settings, including being hypnotized to feel sudden intense drowsiness, which would progress to sleep onset within 2 to 3 minutes, following the post-hypnotic suggestion that the event I was thinking about was too much for me to handle, as a method of limiting the amount of time that I would spend thinking about being abused, and to make me trust the people who hypnotized me, and to think they were trying to help me deal with a negative event, and controlling sleeping patterns consistent with what is necessary to conceal symptoms of insomnia and the resulting medical malpractice case they prevented me from opening. The hypnosis was also used to inhibit and prevent sleep onset and induce an inability to stay asleep suddenly and unexpectedly, so that I would not be able to expect or prepare for these unintentional sleep disturbances and replicate sleep deprivation symptoms, to inhibit cognition, to conceal the fact that the cognitive inhibition was being caused by hypnosis. I noticed that when, like, say for example, one day I was sleep deprived and I was trying to focus, and I had the cognitive inhibition while I was trying to work, and I just tried to work through it, right? And it was believable at the time that it was caused by the sleep deprivation, the because I was actually sleep deprived, right? And then the next day, so that night, I ended up sleeping wonderfully, right? Fully rested, um, no problems at all. And then all of a sudden, when I was specifically, doing a behavior they attempted to inhibit, working on a project, I was, this was what really stood out to me the most, though, was because I slowly, I somewhat noticed that, like I was feeling sleep deprived, but I didn't like consciously like think about how I wasn't sleep deprived. And then when I realized like I felt more sleep deprived than I did the day before, when that I wasn't sleep deprived. I noticed that I wasn't sleep deprived, and that but I felt more sleep deprived than I did the day before when I was actually sleep deprived. Um, and that stood out to me that it was caused by the hypnosis. And then very abruptly and suddenly, the hypnotic suggestion reduced in intensity to a very significant degree, probably to like 10% of the intensity, right? Because that's about the pattern that they would do, kind of like boiling the frog to try to just keep me from resisting the hypnotic suggestions, or um, you know uh, reacting by trying harder to you know uh, yeah. Anyways, um, resist the inhibition of behavior. And I'm going to end this video before it gets too long. I'm probably going to have to remake it. This is the second time. The last time it took me an hour and a half to get through, so I'm hoping that this one will be a lot faster and I won't run out of memory on my phone.